Hey, what's up guys, Pablo Munoz here. Welcome to another tutorial. It's been a while, but today I have a set of new brushes or free resources for you to try, and they're really cool for a very particular stylized look when it comes to sculpting hair in ZBrush. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it. All right, so these set of brushes are very particular for, this type of stylized hair where it's like literally sculpted hair. And this is a project that I've been using for the 3D snippets. So this kind of like samurai monkey, and the effect of the hair, or this stylized hair, is done with the brushes and the resources that I'm going to share with you today. So just to give you a little bit of context, let's just switch to this other screen. This is the project that I've been using for the 3D snippets for the month of November. So basically what I do with the 3D snippets, in case you don't know or not familiar with this project, I tend to just try new things, develop new resources, try different kind of like resources and software and things like that, and throughout the process I just share my findings and with the subscribers to the 3D snippets. But basically this is the character that I've been using or creating for the 3D snippets. This is one of the final renders, and you see I kind of like maintain that sort of stylization. So this kind of like looks almost like a toy or a collectible, so something tiny. I also exaggerated the flat perspective of the lens of the camera just to enhance the sort of kind of like miniature look of it. But anyway, I digress. So let's just go back to the tutorial. So I'm going to show you how the brushes work, and I'm going to show you how to use them. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the lightbox. I'm using the standard UI of ZBrush, and at the time of this recording, I'm using the ZBrush 2022.0.05, which is still one of the previous versions of ZBrush before it was acquired by Maxon. So I created the brushes with this in case you have the new version or the older version, so you can also use brushes regardless of the version of ZBrush. As long as it is 2022 or above, you'll be able to use them. So that's the only reason I'm mentioning that. All right, so I have already set them up, and I just installed them. And when I say install them, I just copy them into the folder. So I go into my brush folder, and this one right here is called the Sculptris Pro Stylized Hair. So the Sculptris Pro is just cropped in there, but it's Sculptris Pro Stylized Hair. So I'm gonna double click on that, and we have 15 brushes that we can use to create this type of thing. Now, what I'm gonna say is that some of them are very similar to some of the brushes that are in ZBrush. I just lightly tweak them, change the alphas, some of the settings, so they're not that different from what you can already find in ZBrush. So you don't have to use these these brushes. This just speeds up the workflow. So before I load any of these brushes, I'm going to show you the brushes that come with ZBrush that you can use to essentially create a very similar effect, so you can tweak them as well yourself. So just before I load these brushes up, let's go ahead and click on the brush thumbnail, and I'm going to select the snake hook brush, and you can use any of the snake hook snake hook 2, the snake sphere, the cactus, any of those. So I'm going to click on the snake hook brush and click on OK. Or actually, let's click on OK, right? So this pop-up basically tells you that this specific brush works better when you have Sculptris Pro enabled. So I'm going to click on that to enable it. And just to show you how this works in a simple manner, I'm going to switch to a sphere like so. Maybe, yeah, I think that should be okay. So I have a Sculptris Pro enabled. I'm going to increase the brush size, and I'm going to start like pulling this like so. Right, so you can see that it's very similar to one of the brushes that I already have, the tweaked brushes, right? So you can just do that with the snake hook brush, and because I have a Sculptris Pro enabled, if I enable the polyframe, you see ZBrush automatically generates, geometry wherever I need to. Now the problem with this brush, or not the problem, but kind of like one of the limitations in terms of creating this sort of stylized hair, is that it doesn't allow you to do much of a layering. So you see, it just sort of pushes things on top. And it creates a very thick, it's just pulling things on top of each other. So one of the things that I changed was these effects, so that you can kind of like layer multiple pieces. And I'll show you that in a bit. But I just want to show you that the new brushes that I'm sharing are not that different from what comes with ZBrush. I just lightly tweak them to suit a specific need. But this is a fantastic brush to do all sorts of things. Now, another thing to keep in mind with this type of brushes that work with Sculptris Pro, and this is just an extra added bonus tip in case you don't know about it. If you go to the brush palette right here, there is this section called Sculptris Pro. So if you click on that one, it has this switch that says it wants Sculptris Pro. So basically, if you have a brush that has this enabled, let's say if you customize your own brush and you save it, which is pretty much what I've done with the set of brushes, if you have this on, what ZBrush is going to do is automatically tells you that in order to work with whatever brush you save that has this enabled, you need to use Sculptris Pro just for better results, right? So for example, if I go ahead and select something like the move brush or the polish brush, you see that one doesn't have this enabled because you don't really need to use Sculptris Pro to get the best results out of this one. If I switch to another snake hook brush, like the cactus, it would have this. So if I don't have, let's go back to the move brush. Let's go ahead and turn off, actually, let's go to the standard brush, turn off Sculptris Pro, go back to the move brush. All right, so right now what I have is just the move brush and I don't have Sculptris Pro enabled. So if I click on this one and go to the snake cactus, I'm gonna get the pop-up. So this is the pop-up that this switch right here in the brush palette is telling ZBrush that this brush needs. So I'm gonna click OK, and you'll see that we have this enabled for this brush, so we can enable Sculptris Pro. So all of this is just to say that if you want to save your own brushes and you want them to use Sculptris Pro, you just need to enable that switch, and next time that you load it up, it's going to get that pop-up telling you that whatever brush you saved is better to be used with Sculptris Pro so that you get the best effect. All right, so let's go ahead and select something very cool like the snake sphere, right? And by the way, obviously, I'm just giving you the walkthrough of some of the brushes that come with ZBrush anyway. But basically, this is a really cool brush that allows you to do these really curly things. And it's really cool. The problem, or again, one of the limitations I found with this brush is that whatever I do, whatever I press and click and drag, is going to push and pull this geometry out of or based on the normal of the polygon that you started clicking, right? So if I want to do something that goes like down, like let's say like a dreadlock or something, I can click on this one and then push down, but you see it's not gonna pull it down, it's just gonna keep pushing towards the camera because that's where the normals of these polygons are facing towards, right? So there is a very simple way of tweaking this, and this is the reason why I want to show you the basic tools or the basic brushes and how you can tweak them to create your own brushes. So if you go to the brush palette, the main one, and you can stop the tutorial after I give you this tip because that's the most valuable tip in terms of snake hook brushes and all of that. But stay tuned if you want to know about the custom brushes. Basically, if you go to the modifiers, right, this brush modifier is one of the most important sliders for any type of brush. And what this modifier does is just modifies, as the name says, the behavior of the brush, but it's going to do it based on the type of brush. So if you hover over whatever brush you have selected, you'll see that it's based on the sphere type, right? If you change it to, I don't know, like the move brush and do the same thing, hover over, it will tell you this one is based on move brushes. Same thing with the move topological is going to be based on the move brush. So there's just about 15 or so base type of brushes in ZBrush. And from those type of brushes, you can create a whole bunch of them. So let's go back to Snake Sphere. And you see this one is set to 100. So for this particular type of brushes, this modifier means that at 100% is going to look and evaluate the model that you currently have and is going to create this effect based 100% on the normal of the polygon. But if you go ahead and set this to 0, right, now it's going to take 0 influence of the normal of the polygon. So that means I can now just pull it down and you see from the side, it's almost like vertical, right? So it's not going to come out like this one. This is going to go down like so, right? So you will be able to do this sort of like layering effect. And that's one of the main things that I've tweaked in all of the brushes that I'm sharing with you, that you can do this type of things. Obviously, you can tweak it a bit. So maybe, let's say 8. That will give you like 8%. So that is not going to come straight down. It's going to have a slight, inclination. So that's pretty good. And it still allows you to create a very intricate, set of dreadlocks in this case, very, very easily, right? But it is using Sculptris Pro. So just keep in mind that as you use Sculptris Pro with any of the brushes, and this is very important for any of the brushes that use Sculptris Pro, as you click and drag and add this, you're literally adding more topology, right? Or more points. So pay attention to this set here, or like this number here. If I click and drag, you see I'm just adding thousands of polygons just with one click. But it is really, really cool, right? So all I've done really here is just I've taken the snake hook brush with the sphere or the snake sphere, tweak the modifier just to change how it is pull or push from the geometry with the brush modifier, just a quick recap. And now I have a completely different brush. Now, because this brush, it is based on the snake hook brush, and I open up the Sculptris Pro, it has this switch enabled. So all I need to do now is go ahead and save this as my own brush. And if I want to save, an icon, let's just go ahead and clone this so that I don't affect the original. If I want to save this, I can go ahead and click on select icon, and it's going to grab whatever I have here on the canvas, and you'll see my icon in there. And I can go ahead and save this with my own, name, like mop, maybe, whatever it is. And then I can just load it up. It's gonna, because I have this switch, is gonna tell me, hey, this brush needs, or it will behave better with Sculptris Pro, and then I can just start doing this. So that is kind of like the introduction of how I tweak those brushes, and why I found these two things to be invaluable. So the main one is the brush modifier when it comes to snake hook brushes, and also this little switch in here, right? And this is obviously just if you want to create or tweak your own brushes. But you don't have to do any of that. If you want to just use the resources that I'm providing, they are free to download. You can just go to the ZBrush Guides website, and in the resources, you'll find the little pack in there for free. I'm also going to add the link to them in the description of this video. And if you're watching this within the ZBrush Guides website, there is a tiny tutorial on how to set them up so that whenever you open ZBrush, you have them available to you. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and use another sphere just to give you a little bit of the workflow on how I work with these brushes. And let's go ahead and set back to something standard like the move brush. Let's collapse this right here. So I have my base mesh. Let's say this is the, I don't know, like the face of the monkey that I showed you, right? So if I go ahead and switch to one of my brushes, let's go ahead and bring in the lightbox. And I'm going to load up one of my favorite, which is this quick layering Stylize here. So I'm going to click on that, and I'm calling them the chunks. So, because that's basically what it is, just a bunch of chunks. So I'm going to click and drag to pull this like so. And you see it has a very similar effect to what I showed you at the beginning with the snake hook brush. But if I rotate the camera slightly, I will be able to layer up this effect and create this really cool Stylize hair. Right? And obviously you can just go and, do like different things like that, like just flicks of hair. But as you can see, they're like chunks, and it creates this really cool stylized effect. And some of the time when I go over the same area like this, you get these kind of like spikes. You can, because you have Sculptris Pro, you can smooth that out and just remove it. So very, very cool stuff. Now, in terms of the workflow, you can just go ahead and do this. And if you have like a face in here, it will look fine. But I prefer to work on a separate mesh, right? I'll show you a practical example with another character that I have prepared, but let's go ahead and go back in time a bit. Let's actually switch back to the clay brush, and let's go ahead and enable symmetry as well. And I'm just gonna add some eyes here, just so that you have them as a reference. Right? So let's say that this is our character. Don't worry, I'm going to show you something a bit better than this in just a second. But let's go back to the quick layering brush. So the thing is, if I start like using this in this subtool, it's fine. It will look fine. But I want to have more control over the areas that, let's say, have the stylized hair, and the areas that are not going to have hair. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this face, and I'm going to go ahead and scale it down or inflate it down. So to do that, I'm going to also show you if I enable transparency. So right now we have just an exact copy of the mesh, so you won't see any difference. But if I go to the deformation palette right here, I'm going to go ahead and click on inflate, but in the minus. So I'm going to click and drag to the -1. So you see it's sort of like receding. Hopefully you can see towards the edge. So I'm going to go for something like that. Right? And so basically what I've done is just reduce the length or the volume of this inner sphere now, right? And let's go ahead and switch back or turn off the transparency. There's like some bits and pieces that are sticking out probably. So what I like to do is just give this a different color to the material or the color that I'm working with. So I'm gonna select something like a blue tint like so, go to color, fill object, and then go back to white. All right, so you see in my subtools, we have the blue color, and then we have the original face. Now, if I don't see any blue color sticking out, that's a good sign. Sometimes you might see it, and then you can just go ahead and smooth it out. But what this means in terms of the workflow is that I can take, let's say, the blue one, right? And I'm going to also turn off RGB for this brush so that it doesn't affect the color. But yeah, what it means is that I can just go ahead and maybe with a smaller brush size, start pulling, right? So you see it just coming out of the face, but it's not affecting the actual face. So you keep everything separate, and we can just do this type of really cool stylized hair. And it's something done really, really quickly, right? That I think, in terms of like blocking things out, like you can totally go ahead and create a more realistic hair after, based on these chunks of hair. But as a quick blocker, you see how quick this is, right? And this is just one of the 15 brushes that you can use, right? So again, this is nothing too interesting, but I think it shows the effect. And what's cool about it is if I turn off the first one, or alternatively, you can go to solo mode, you see this is what I'm using to create this hair. And if anything, you can increase your brush size, holding shift. Again, because you also have Sculptris Pro, you can sort of remove or simplify this even more so that it doesn't, or there's no chance that any of this area is coming through the face, like so. And let's go ahead and switch to the move brush now. And I'm just going to push this in, right? You won't see it, so it doesn't really matter. And that's it. You can have this separately from the face. So that means you can also push this out. You can adjust the length of this. This is just move brush. So it's a very cool and simple way of blocking something out. And that's the main purpose of the brushes, right? So that's in terms of the workflow. Now let's go ahead and switch to something a little bit more interesting than this face. So I have this guy here, this character that I've created a while back. So this, I think I call him Gaspar Loren or something. This guy is obviously has like subdivisions and all of that. So you see this head that I have here selected. If I go to geometry, I have subdivision levels. I can go into solo mode so you can see what it is, right? So I have subdivision levels and I have like a bunch of details and everything. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to show you the workflow that I just showed you with the silly face and the blue hair. That if you have something like this and you want to add like sculpted hair, maybe in this case the stylization doesn't really go, because I have something that is tending towards the realistic in a way in terms of the treatment of the surface, and the stylized hair doesn't have that. But I just want to show you as a practical example that if you have subdivision levels, in this case, you won't be able to use Sculptris Pro. As soon as I click on this one, it's gonna, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Let me just go back one. Obviously, the move brush doesn't work with Sculptris Pro, but let's click on the layering one. If I click on this one, it's going to affect the model, but it's not going to do it with Sculptris Pro, right? So let's go ahead and undo that again. And this is the reason, let's go back out of solo. This is the reason I show you the workflow. So in this case, I went ahead and duplicated the entire face. I removed the subdivision levels, and I end up with this weird thing that I went ahead and using the Sculptris Pro, let's turn on polyframe so you can see. I just went ahead and smooth things out like that. So I'm gonna do it again just to show you the process. I also tag it with a red color so I could see it. So I'm gonna turn this off. I'm gonna select the actual mesh, and I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm showing you the entire, step-by-step process again. So let's actually name it properly. So step one would be to take whatever you want to use as your base to create the head, to create the hair. In most cases would be your head. So in this case, step one selected and duplicated. So that's step one. All right, so now I have a duplicate of the head and I'm still in solo mode. What I'm going to do is I have multiple subdivision levels. I don't need to have all these details. In fact, I'm going to remove most of them. So I'm going to go to subdivision 3, and I'm going to delete lower and delete higher. So now we have this simple base in here. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to give it this time a sort of yellowish color. It doesn't really matter what it is. And I'm going to go to color, fill object, go back to white. And that's the third step. So the second step was just to delete the lower and higher subdivision. The third step is just to tag it with a color. And this is going to make your life a lot easier. You can change the color afterwards if you want. So now we can get out of solo mode. So that's next step, right? And you see that it's like a intersection between the two meshes. So we're gonna go to the deformation palette, same thing. I'm gonna deflate it in -1 or -2. And for the most part, that gets the job done. So now if I go into solo mode, we have this mesh that is being kind of like shrinked down a little bit and living inside this other mesh. But probably I'm gonna change the color to something more like red so that you can see a bit better. Yellow is not the best option. There we go. So you see that there's some bits and pieces, and probably in this case we have ears and all of that. So this is what we need to clean up before we jump into the sculpting. So what I can do is just holding my Shift key, I'm gonna smooth this out, and that's gonna simplify things. We can also go into, hang on, let me undo that. I think I have more polygons than what is allowed for Sculptris Pro. Let me just check that I don't have any subdivisions. Oh, okay, hang on. I think I forgot to delete higher. Oh, actually, I just moved. I got confused with these switches. So let's just go back to what I was saying. So instead of like going lower and higher, I'm gonna delete lower and delete higher. So that is getting rid of the subdivision level. So let me just see if yeah, okay. Go back to what I was saying. I sometimes get confused with these two because in my custom UI I have the lower and higher res in a stack rather than next to each other. But anyway, let's ignore that for a bit. And I'm gonna use the smooth brush to get rid of the ear on this side. Same thing for this side. And I'm gonna remove some of these kind of like spikes and things around the face. So I'm just gonna simplify this mesh because ultimately all I want is to be able to pull things out of it. All right, now if I go into solo mode, you see there is a lot of intersection that is visible. So at this point, what I would go with is the move brush, and we can also go to the move brush, or sorry, to the brush palette, open up the curve and click on AccuCurve, and that allows me to have like a more pointy effect. I'm just holding the Alt key, which is basically a way to push based on the normals of the polygon. So holding the Alt key and then just push this in. Also, I have symmetry on, but I shouldn't because this guy doesn't have symmetry anymore. So you see, just with a simple pulling and pushing, you get this nice and clean, so you don't see this model, coming through. So that is pretty much it. I think there's like something here in the mouth, but you won't see that. All right, so that is cool. So if I go into solo, now we can go ahead and start using the brushes. So there are like multiple brushes. I'm gonna try to show you very briefly all of them. But in this case, I just like the quick layering brush because it allows you to work this way. So I'm gonna start, actually I'm gonna start from the back here if I wanna do something more interesting. Right, and you see how just by rotating the camera slightly, you sort of like layer the effect. And what I did there is changing the, actually, let me just show you. I'm gonna right click, I'm gonna change the focal shift. So changing the focal shift for this brush, what it does, it changes the length of what you can pull. So if I push it towards, say, the 40, I can just pull, and you see it just very, very elongated. And it starts to destroy a little bit of the effect, but you can just control that. If I change this to be, let's say, minus 56 in the focal shift, even if I keep pulling, you see, it sort of like stops in there. So I like to, this is one of the things that I tweaked for the brushes anyway. So I'm gonna go to the brush, and I'm gonna reset current brush, right? So it gets the settings that I've set up for you, and also turn off RGB. All right, so this is just to show you one of the ways that I would approach the blockout or the setup of a more stylized hair. And if the color is too intense, you can change it, or you can also go to render. You can go to fade opacity and just change this is just the preview of the poly paint. So I'm just gonna do one side, or what I would do for a side like this, and I wanna kind of like stop around here. And it could be, it could be used not only for hair, it could also be used for, layering some kind of like scales or something. So that is pretty cool. Let's push this a bit more. And you can also reduce the brush size and get some like finer sort of like chunks of hair coming out from the front, or just to refine some of the things that you did. You can just go over the same areas over and over with smaller brushes and refine it. So yeah, like I said, this is a pretty exciting sort of like technique to create this type of things. So obviously I'm not gonna do the entire character. This is just to showcase some of the brushes. Let's go ahead and click on Lightbox, go back to, I'm gonna show you the, so I've shown you this one, which is my favorite. Let's go ahead and now try the thick chunks. So this one is very similar, but it's gonna give you like very thick, kind of like squarish type of blobs. Also, let's go ahead and remove the RGB. So this one will give you a very, very similar result. So it is based on the same brush, but with slightly different settings. So it's going to be a lot chunkier and thicker than the one that is kind of like layering on top. So you see it's more blobby. And if you look at it from the side or from like the profile, it's a lot thicker. So that's slightly different, but in general, it will give you a very similar results. I would use this with a larger brush actually. So you get this thick block out first. Let's go ahead and check another one. So another similar one is these flat pointy chunks. So this one is something that I would use with a lower size, so like smaller size, just in these areas. Let's also turn on RGB. And what it does is just basically the same effect, but it's going to be more pointy and flatter. Let's go ahead and compare it with one of these ones. Right, so if you look at it in the profile, this one is very, very sharp in terms of how it finishes compared to the chunky ones. So you can use this to refine certain flicks of hair, or something that is a little bit more like spikes maybe. You could also use, not just for hair, like I said, you could use for I don't know, some kind of like reptile that has tiny spikes of hair all around. And obviously the smaller that you go with the brush, the finer they will look and the more resolution that you will be adding. So we're right now at 348 and we started with, I think, 40,000 or something. So you see the difference, right? So those are three standard kind of like chunky brushes that I created, these three: the thick chunks, the quick layering, and the flat pointy. Now there are other really cool ones, so I'm gonna continue with the control thin standard hair for stylized hair and the thin long spikes. So let's go for this one first. So I'm gonna double click on that. This is very, very similar to the snake hook brush, but it gives you a longer effect in a way. So I can just go ahead and click and drag. Again, let's turn off RGB. Click and drag, maybe with a larger brush actually. So you see, it just gives you these long and control spikes. And it is affected, or like the behavior of this brush is affected by the speed. So if you go ahead and just do it very slowly, it at some point is just going to stop, right? And start like being, destroy itself. Or if you do it really fast, you have a more of a chance to get like longer spikes, really, really quick and easy. Right? And obviously with this one, because it just ends in a very thin sort of surface, you might get some of these artifacts. But again, this is really easy to just hold the shift key and then just smooth that out and just clean it up a little bit, right? If you don't want to do that, what you can do instead is go to the stroke palette, open up the Sculptris Pro, and you can decrease this number of the subdivide. So I can go for 0.7, and that way you get more resolution, like so you get less of those artifacts. But that doesn't have anything to do with the brush settings itself. That's just something to do with Sculptris Pro. So it is more of a global setting. So now any brush that I use will have that. Right, so as you can see, this is getting a little bit crazy, but it is a fun thing to do. Now let's go ahead and open up the control one. So the control one allows you to maintain a consistent thickness over the same sort of area. So let's turn off RGB and I want to increase the brush size a bit. That's too much. All right, so you see, it just allows you to create this sort of like wavy pattern. Whereas, if you try with the previous one, it's just going to break a lot faster. So this one is very similar. It's just something that I would use to, create kind of like tentacles or things of that nature that allows me to have a bit more control in terms of the direction, as you can see. And it just breaks down at some point. But again, this is just the nature of Sculptris Pro. All right, so very similar. I just added there because it's something that I found useful, but it is similar to the previous one. It's just with the previous one. So if I go back to thin longs, if I try to do that with this one, it's not going to work. So I'm going to push it and then start doing this. You'll see, as I start to zigzag in the movement, it just breaks down. So let's do it again. Push out. You see, it just flattens things quite a bit and destroys it. So that's what this is as an alternative. This other one, that allows you to do that sort of thing. It just allows you to maintain that thickness a little bit more if you want to do this sort of wavy pattern, right? So that's the idea, or the main difference between those two. All right, so we also have, let's go for the dreadlocks. These clean dreadlocks, layer dreadlocks and all of that. So I'm going to start with the clean one. This is pretty much a tweaked version of the sphere. So let's go ahead and reduce that, the snake sphere. So I'm going to do that. Also, let's turn on RGB. So you can create this sort of dreadlocks. Let's do something here on the side. But again, it's a really quick and easy way to get started and to block out a series of, dreadlocks. I'm gonna go into solo mode just so I can, because the ear is getting in the way. So I'm just gonna do that just to show you how easy this is. There we go. And again, it's more of the same. It's the same sort of style, not style, sorry, the same type of brushes, just slightly tweaked to create the effect that I wanted, which in this case was to sort of block out dreadlocks. Or again, this could be used in a variety of ways. It could be a bunch of tentacles, interlocking or like wrapping around and that sort of thing. So this concept is getting a little bit out of hand, but I think you get the idea, right? So it's pretty cool. Right? Now, the alternative to those are a couple of interesting brushes like the layer dreadlocks and the texture dreadlocks. So these ones are basically the same thing. It just gives you a slightly different look. So I'm going to start with the layer dreadlocks. So I'm going to push this up. I'm going to turn off RGB, make sure that I have enough resolution. There we go. So this one is this is meant to be like this. It's going to give you this very textury, rough, thick look. So like I said, it's very similar to the sphere brush, right? But it's gonna give you that sort of like texture straight away that you can play with. Obviously, you can smooth all of these, but you have that texture already in there. So it would be pretty easy to reduce the amount of texture in these dreadlocks. But I just found it interesting. So just with these dreadlocks, you see it just adds a ton of resolution. So just be aware of that one. Now, the next one would be the layered dreadlocks. Sorry, that's the one that we're using. The next one would be the texture dreadlocks. So I'm going to push this out. So this one, also, let's cancel that. Let's turn off RGB. There we go. So this one is very much the same brush that comes with ZBrush, the snake cactus brush. Again, with some minor tweaks, especially in the way that it creates this sort of like textured effect, and then you can push it like so. I'm running out of like space to pull this type of things, but you see, it just has more more resolution and more variation in the texture. So this one is a cool one, or an alternative to the simple one or the clean ones, but it will also add a bunch of resolution just because of that texture feel to it. All right, so we've covered most of them. The only one that is kind of like tricky that I need to show you, the other ones you can kind of like play around with them, this curly chunky one. So I'm going to click on that one. For that though, I'm going to show you in this example here. I'm going to go into solo mode as well, because this one is mainly to create this sort of like curly effect that would most likely be affected by gravity. So it's going to be pulled down. So this one is based on, I can't remember which one, but one of these snake hook brushes, right? The ones with a curve. So basically you can just draw a tiny curve, like almost with a U or a C shape, like so. And then you can start pulling down. So let me just go ahead and bring in my Epic Pen just to show you what this is going to do. So here is your curve. And what I'm going to do is pull down, right? But as I go down, I'm going to try to go in a zigzag, like so. So the idea of having a shape like a C shape is that this thing is going to start wrapping around this path, right, and create kind of like a curly effect. So the effect of the curliness is going to be determined by the speed, right, at which you kind of like draw this pattern, and obviously the shape. So if you do something crazy like this in terms of the curve, it's going to be a mess. If you do something too tiny, it's going to be hard to see. So what I would recommend for this specific brush is to have like some kind of like a C shape, like I just wrote in there. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and give it a go. So again, I'm going to click and drag, slowly start doing zigzag motions. And this is pretty cool, right? So it is a bit experimental. It's not going to give you like a perfect curl, but this is the idea with the settings that I tweak. So again, I'm going to create a tiny little curve like so. And this is going to be basically the profile that is going to wrap around. And I'm gonna, slowly start moving left to right. So it might get, it might take a while to get the hang of it. It has to do with the speed. So you see at some points I'm doing it a little bit faster, at some points I'm doing it a bit slower, and that affects kind of like the compression of that curl. But it is a very cool, very simple effect to create something that is a rather complex shape. One more time, just to show you actually, let me just show you the difference if you do it with a weird shape like this. It's still going to work, but it's not going to give you the same sort of effect. And, it might just become a little bit too crazy. There we go. So you see, it's not perfect. So like I said, the key here is the speed, the zigzag motion, and having, start with a C shape like this, right? So zigzag motion, slightly like slower. The faster that you go, the faster that it's going to wrap around. So yeah, just just a little bit wonky here, but that is the idea, right? So you get some like interesting shapes straight away, but this one requires a little bit of setup, just what I showed you, and a little bit of testing and practicing to get the thing right. And of course, afterwards you can just go ahead and select something like the move brush, and start pulling and adjusting the volumes and the usual things. All right, so let's go back to our character here. That's looking great. Let's go ahead and click on Lightbox. And so I covered the main ones. I just want to show you a couple more. So these two, the Fur Stylized and the Fur Alternative, are basically similar. It's based on the same brushes, but I'm gonna actually do it in. Let's do it in this guy here, right? Because this one doesn't pull things that much, but it still generates a nice sort of like layering effect. So you can just do a bit of this to create fur. And then rotate the camera slightly, and you generate this. It could be fur for animal, or it could also be some kind of like scales, because at the end of the day, they're kind of like very pointy. But yeah, so play around with this one. You can also change the alpha. This is the one that I found useful for this thing, but you can change the alpha and see what that gives you. So this is one of them. The other one is the alternative, that is going to give you something a bit chunkier. And you can just sort of like pull it a little bit more. So you can start with this one, and some areas that should have like, shorter hair or things like that, you can use the other one. But this is kind of like a good alternative. And you can keep pulling and pushing from the same area, because it's a Sculptris Pro, right? So, this is another alternative. So that's the other one. And the final ones that I want to show you are the standard blocking, the surface blocking, and the refiner. So these three are not necessarily for the style that I'm showing you, in terms of like pulling things out of a mesh or the same workflow. They're more to block out areas, and they work great with Sculptris Pro. So I would start with something like the blocking. So double click on that, and I'm just gonna, let's go ahead and click on this guy right here. I'm gonna turn that off, or just delete it. Select this one again, duplicate it. And I'm going to reduce the amount of polygons because I don't need that much. Oh, sorry. Same thing. Delete higher, delete lower. All right. So 198 polygons. That should be okay. So this one is basically your clay builder brush in a way. So this is the one that I would use if I do like a more realistic stylized hair, like with more realistic shapes, just to block it out. So it's kind of like the curved tubes. Again, I have tweaked this brush so that it behaves better with the Sculptris Pro, and just to generate this sort of like very blocky surface. So this one allows you to block out, I guess, the flow of the hair, right? So let's say that this is, this guy has like a nice sort of like, I don't know what you call it this, but a nice hairstyle, right? So it allows you to create this very nice sort of block out, right, using Sculptris Pro. And it's not too crazy, right, in terms of the amount of polygons. Then you would go with something like the standard blocking, maybe with a smaller brush size. And this would give it an extra added volume. You see, it has a very nice and sharp way of creating, bulkiness in a way. So this is what I call it, the standard brush, or the standard blocking brush. So you can just add that extra volume that is needed to convey that effect, right? And it still allows you to create a really nice sort of motion to define the flow. And finally, Obviously, I'm doing this very, very quickly, but you can also use the standard refine here. And this is your, similar to your damp standard brush, but with the Sculptris Pro enabled. It allows you to sort of cut through this model using Sculptris Pro and then just refine the shapes. You can use the damp standard brush as well with a Sculptris Pro, but I just found that these sort of thick outlines really, really help. Like so. And you can also use this and any of the brushes with the Alt key. So any of the 3 brushes that I'm showing you, right? So Alt, click and drag, and you can see we can refine that sort of sharpness of the standard stylized brush a little bit more. All right, so obviously this is incredibly fast just to be able to go through all the brushes and show you the effect. But as you can see, if you spend a little bit more time, you can get something very quickly that looks I think kind of cool, and is not that crazy in terms of the amount of polygons. So that is basically that's all the pack of these brushes. And that's what I wanted to show you. Like I said, it's more about the workflow, knowing how to apply them, and expecting that this is more of a blocking brush, and you won't be able to get like super realistic stuff. It's more about embracing the sketchiness and the block out nature of these brushes. So just to wrap it up, I'm gonna go ahead and go back to this guy just to show you that in terms of the workflow is pretty much what I showed you, right? So I have my main character. So I'm gonna go into solo mode, which is this body. Nothing fancy. I didn't go or spend too much time in certain areas that are not visible for this concept. And the hair as well. I only pull and push the areas that are kind of like sticking out of the armor, but it's basically a duplicate of the body. So when I get out of solo mode, so you see I have without hair and with hair, right? So it makes a massive difference in terms of how you read this character and the silhouette and the outline. So in terms of workflow, it is exactly the same thing as I showed you, and I use the exact same brushes that I cover in this tutorial. So hopefully this has been of help. I'm gonna leave the link to these resources in the description of this video. And if you have any questions or find any issues with these brushes, feel free to drop them in the comments of this video, and I'll do my best to answer as soon as I can. And yeah, other than this, if you make something out with these brushes, feel free to tag me at Pablander. I would love to see what you make. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Cheers.